Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Kash Patel joins us at 3:30, the former deputy assistant to President Trump. We'll talk to him about Donald Trump's second day in that trial in New York as the the newspaper tabloid guy is one of the star witnesses against Trump. It's just an amazing trial, isn't it? Chip Roy is going to be here. 4 o'clock, the congressman. We talked to him. And at 5:30, Jonathan Brunitsky is here. He's with Athos Public Relations. We talked to him about his latest column, Jewish Democrats, Wake Up. It's time for that. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, one of the star witnesses here, and there's not that many. You can't have that many star witnesses. Is a guy called David Pecker. He's the guy who runs the National Enquirer. Is there ever a moment in your life where you said, I'm going to turn to the National Enquirer for news? What's really going on in the world today? I'm going to go to the place that ran headlines including redneck aliens take over trailer park. I need to get my head on straight about this story. As you're standing there looking left to right at the bubblegum rack, the National Enquirer, trying to figure out what you're going to buy at that last second at the supermarket checkout. Come on. We just heard Barbara Britt play this. This is Eric Shawn at Fox News. His report on this witness, David Pecker, and what he's been saying inside of this New York courtroom. Take a listen to this.
David Pecker, the former National Enquirer publisher, revealing the secret partnership between the tabloid and Donald Trump. Pecker back on the stand for a second day in the courtroom discussing that relationship. He is a longtime friend of the former president, and he detailed from the stand how the tabloid slanted its coverage to help Trump's election campaign in
The National Enquirer slanted its coverage to help Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Boy, it's a good thing he had the National Enquirer in his corner. Isn't that amazing? They slanted their coverage. I mean, it's almost like they're CNN working on behalf of Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and every Democrat throughout history. It's what are they? The New York Times? They're slanting their coverage to help a political party? That's unbelievable. I can't even believe that's happening. Wait, say it again. The National Enquirer was working to get Trump elected. How? Was it with headlines like police terrified as UFO responds to their signals? Oh, that's fantastic. So Eric Shawn says David Pecker on the stand saying that the publication was working to get Trump elected. Okay, even if that's the case, let's accept that as true. The National Enquirer? That's as good as you can get.
How the tabloid slanted its coverage to help Trump's election campaign in 2016. He said the tabloid would write positive stories about Trump, but negative ones about his Republican primary opponents.
It's like the Washington Post. It's the New York Times. What are these places doing for Biden on a routine basis?
Like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and Ben Carson, slamming them with negative headlines and articles.
Oh, my goodness. Isn't that the best? It's just the best. It's just the best. Now, among the things that he's been saying from the stand, or they want him to say from the stand, is that he's been catching and killing stories for Donald Trump and doing it with his own money and of his own volition. He would catch a story and he would kill it. Stories that would get out there. Well, what kind of stories is he killing? What kind of stories is David Pecker killing? He's catching and killing stories. Well, it turns out he told the court today, you're probably not going to see a lot of coverage of this. He told the court today that he paid for a story that turned out to be completely false about Trump, and he never ran it. In other words, he told the court he worked to kill a false story about Trump, which, by the way, let me just remind you, this is also how non-disclosure agreements are used. Sometimes you have someone who wants to make ridiculous allegations about you, and you're saying, okay, do I really want to have this battle out in public? And it's a form of blackmail, candidly. But they'll make a false allegation, and you want to make it go away, so you establish a non-disclosure agreement. Please don't make allegations like that in public. They give her some cash. They give him some cash. This is also one of the reasons people settle court battles. But maybe they can't, afford it. Or maybe they realize it's going to take too much out of them, whether in terms of reputation or in terms of money. So there are all sorts of reasons people resolve things other than going to full-blown trials or other than having full-blown public arguments about the subject. So here, a Fox report today, former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker testified that he worked with former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen to kill an unsubstantiated story about former President Trump fathering a child with a Trump Tower maid. Pecker's Tuesday testimony came amid the New York versus Trump trial. He said he received a tip that a doorman at Trump Tower, a guy called Dino Sajudin, was offering to sell the story and name the maid in question. All right, so we got an Arnold Schwarzenegger-style story here that Trump impregnated the maid. That's the claim. Pecker said he notified Cohen of Sajudin's intent, and Cohen said the story was, quote, completely false, but said he would work to confirm it. Pecker said the Enquirer ultimately purchased the story with its own funds for $30,000. He said if the story had turned out to be true, the Enquirer would have published it shortly after the 2016 election, but they could not verify Sajudin's claims. In fact, Pecker testified, again today, before open court, he testified that the Enquirer ultimately found that the claims were, quote, 1,000% untrue. Pecker later confirmed to prosecutors that he had never paid to kill a story for Trump prior to the incident. Well, that doesn't that offer a lot of information for us? So he wasn't in the business of trying to kill stories on Trump's behalf. This is what prosecutors have been alleging. Prior to the incident, which apparently was this 2016 election era claim where a doorman was trying to sell a story to the National Enquirer. Hey, did you know Trump impregnated a maid? Really? Yeah. And I'll give you the details if you pay me for it. Pays $30,000. They get the details. It turns out it's bunk. There's nothing to it. David Pecker says we chased the story and got nothing. Now, it didn't stop them, of course, from publishing police terrified as UFOs respond to their signals. That particular instinct didn't stop them there. But it did stop them in the Trump story. It did stop. They look. Also, it's a little harder to, have a problem with litigation. It's easier to protect yourself when you generically say police terrified as UFO responds to their signals. It's more specific when you go after a billionaire and say that he impregnated his maid. Could be more of a legal problem for you. So that's the testimony today from David Pecker. So that's going great. So Alvin Bragg's star witnesses are the supermarket tabloid conspiracy theorists and a convicted felony liar called Michael Cohen. Those are the big witnesses. That's the Alvin Bragg case in a nutshell. Which is, it would be even more hilarious if it wasn't so tyrannical, if the whole point of it wasn't designed to destroy and impoverish Joe Biden's political opponent. Now, Trump has been trying to speak on all of this, but the judge has imposed a pretty onerous gag order on him. And in fact, today, during the court proceedings this morning, they had a back and forth about whether or not Trump had violated the terms of the gag order. And the judge was very stern and angry with Trump's team for how close to the line Trump appears to be dancing when he posts things on Truth Social and these kinds of things. Now, he hasn't imposed any sort of penalty on Trump's team yet, but the prosecutors here, Alvin Bragg and company, they want tens of thousands of dollars taken out of Trump for every single instance that they claim he violated the judge's gag order. Now, what does that gag order include? How onerous is it? Well, for that, let's turn to CNN's Daniel Dale. He's the fact checker over at CNN, and they only bring him on whenever he can attack Republicans. You don't see routine fact checks from this guy for everything that comes out of Joe Biden's mouth, which would require not just one person, but a full team of fact checkers to keep up with if you were doing this for real at a real journalistic organization. But here's Daniel Dale today talking about the terms of this gag order and what's actually going on here.
Caitlin, he perpetually makes the gag order sound like it gags him more than it actually does. So I don't know what was in those specific articles, but he said he had an article saying this case is a sham, it shouldn't have been brought, and he's not sure if he could even say that. Well, he can say that. That is clearly not prohibited by the gag order. I have the text of the gag order in front of me. What it does, Caitlin, is bar him from three specific kinds of speech. Number one is speaking publicly or directing others to speak publicly about known or reasonably foreseeable witnesses in the case, specifically about their potential participation in the case. Number two.
So who is that? Who is that? So he can't talk about David Pecker. He can't talk about Michael Cohen. He can't talk about Stormy Daniels. He's not allowed to mount a defense for himself here. Meanwhile, all of them are allowed to talk about Trump endlessly. Michael Cohen has a full-blown podcast, apparently. We played some audio from it this past week, where he spends the whole time talking about how much he hates Trump and he wants to take Trump down. But Trump can't respond to that. Now, is that in any conventional understanding of how a justice system is supposed to work rational? Is that rational? That the defendant is not allowed to mount a defense, including in public, as he's routinely smeared and slandered? No, that's insane. But the judge has only imposed a gag order on him, not on Michael Cohen, not on any of these other characters. And one other piece on these guys. If David Pecker was involved in some sort of illegal arrangement where he was killing stories that would damage Trump's campaign and therefore he was conducting election interference, why is he a witness in this trial and not the defendant? Why isn't he being charged with violating the law, if that's the case? Because he's out there saying, I'm paying money, I'm getting these stories. Okay, if that's the case, if that's what Alvin Bragg is alleging happened, why aren't you charging him? What about Michael Cohen? Michael Cohen is the attorney at the center of all of this, who you say was involved in illegally interfering in the election. Why is he a witness in this trial? Why isn't he being charged? It's ludicrous, of course, and obviously the answer to that question is it's political. They're trying to take Trump down. Listen to Daniel Dale for more. Again, who says this is not that big of a deal. He's not gagged from saying that much. No, actually, Daniel Dale, you can say way more than Trump can here.
2 is speaking publicly, directing others to speak publicly about prosecutors other than DA Bragg, staff members in Bragg's office and the court, and the family members of prosecutors, staff members of the court. And it qualifies that if those statements are made with the intent to materially interfere with the case. And then number 3,
okay, so let me pause on number 2. Did you hear what he said? Trump is foreclosed. He's precluded from talking about anybody on the prosecuting team with the exception of Alvin Bragg himself. Do you understand what that means? It means that the guy who led the opening argument yesterday, Matthew Colangelo, the Biden administration official who joined the prosecution against Donald Trump, Trump is not allowed to point that out. He's not allowed to say that the Department of Justice has an untoward hand in this case. He's not allowed to point out that Matthew Colangelo just came from the Justice Department and that there is obviously an effort to take Trump down built into all of this. He's not allowed to mention any of that because the gag order restrains him from mentioning it. So he can talk about Alvin Bragg. He can't mention the most obvious thing to mention in the room, Matthew Colangelo.
Patient in the case. Number 2 is speaking publicly, directing others to speak publicly about prosecutors other than DA Bragg, staff members in Bragg's office and the court, and the family members of prosecutors, staff members of the court.
This is designed, that part, by the way, is designed to protect the judge's Democrat activist adult daughter from any scrutiny from Trump or the people around him whatsoever. That's what that's about. And they keep lying about it. They're like, oh, it's his child. Trump was critical of his child. It's not a child. It's an adult human being, an adult, a woman. That's, in case you were looking for the definition of a woman. An adult female human is a woman. And she happens to be a hardcore Democrat, anti-Trump, pro-Biden activist, and Trump's not allowed to point this out? Her dad, the judge, Merchan, gave to Joe Biden's presidential campaign. Trump's, come on.
And it qualifies that if those statements are made with the intent to materially interfere with the case. And then number 3, he's barred from speaking publicly about or directing others to speak publicly about jurors or prospective jurors. So if he just wants to say this case is a sham, as he has pretty much every time he's appeared before those cameras, he's perfectly allowed to.
Yeah, you can say that. You just can't offer any of the supporting evidence. You're allowed to say this is a scam, and then when someone says, how is it a scam? That's all I can say. That's all I'm allowed to tell you. I'm not allowed to support that statement. So CNN's assessment is that's totally fair.
It's not barred. And I'll just add, Caitlin, I've heard you fact-check this, others on our team fact-check this. He said this case is all Biden. There is precisely zero evidence that President Biden had anything to do with orchestrating, running this case. So he says that pretty much every time. It's completely out of thin air.
So listen to this. So he says it's a sham. He says the Biden administration's connected to it. And Daniel Dale says you're totally allowed to say it's a sham. Nothing's stopping you from saying that. But when you say the Biden administration's involved, you're lying. You're just making it up. Totally out of thin air. And Trump, of course, has the answer, which is Matthew Colangelo, DOJ guy, right from Merrick Garland's employ right into the Alvin Bragg case, which every lawyer I've read and or talked to on this subject says that doesn't make any sense as a career move. You don't go from number 3 in the Justice Department to line prosecutor for the Manhattan DA. That's not how this but that's a stupid career move. That's backwards. Unless, of course, the point is to destroy Trump, which it is. Trump did have some words today, to the extent that he was allowed to express anything. All right, let's go to the phones. I've got Mike in Middletown, New Jersey, calling in. Mike, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks for taking my call. You know, the media is eminently familiar with the catch-and-kill operation. The L.A. Times did it in 2008 for Barack Obama. Remember Professor Rashid Khalidi, the guy who's shall we say, he called Israel an apartheid state, among other things.
Yeah, it's so funny. I forgot about this. I'm so glad you're reminding me of this. The Khalidi tape, which for years the people on the right said, hey, are you going to ever release this? Showing Obama cozying up to this anti-Semite. And the L.A. Times, they had the video and they refused to release it, didn't they, Mike?
That's right, because the source who gave it to them, a.k.a. the Obama campaign, said you can't release it without our approval.
And they wanted to affect.
The ethics work only one way.
They wanted to affect the 2008 election. They wanted to prevent that video from getting out. And do you know where Khalidi teaches now? Do you know what college he teaches at?
I do not. Is it somewhere on the West Coast?
You ready for this? It's Columbia University in New York.
There you go.
I just looked it up. He's apparently he's on sabbatical right now. He's caused enough chaos there. They're taking over from here. But he's right there on Columbia's website. Rashid Khalidi, the Edward Said Professor of Modern Arab Studies at Columbia. Things are going great. They just moved all of their classes to virtual for the rest of the semester because the anti-Semitic mob has become too dangerous for people to go in person. Mike, thank you for reminding us. Yes, the media catching and killing Obama stories for years. In fact, if I had to guess, some newsroom somewhere once tried to stop us from knowing his middle name. Hussein? We can't tell people that. What if you just told us the truth? How about that? That'd be a novel idea. Coming up, Kash Patel. He knows Donald Trump. He'll respond to what's happening in New York today. He joins us next. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Chip Roy here at 4 o'clock. The United States Senate, by the way, within the last hour, signing off on that $95 billion foreign aid package. Congressman Chip Roy will talk about what's going on in Congress. Jonathan Brunitsky is here at 5:30. We talked to him about his new column calling for Jewish Democrats to wake the hell up already. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump, yet another day in court imposed upon him by the American left, led by all sorts of people, including the number 3 at the United States Department of Justice under Joe Biden, Matthew Colangelo. Trump's not allowed to mention that by virtue of the gag order. In fact, he says the gag order is unconstitutional. Here he is this afternoon.
The gag order is totally unconstitutional. Can't even allow articles to be put in. As an example, these are articles that were over the last day and a half. They're very good articles. They say the case is a sham and it shouldn't even be tried. It shouldn't have been submitted. And I don't even know if you're allowed to put them in. We have a gag order, which to me is totally unconstitutional. I'm not allowed to talk, but people are allowed to talk about me. So they can talk about me, they can say whatever they want, they can lie, but I'm not allowed to say anything. I just have to sit back and look at why a conflicted judge has ordered me to have a gag order. I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like this.
So he really is deprived of his ability to speak. For more on this, I want to bring in Kash Patel, former deputy assistant to President Trump, former chief of staff of the Department of Defense, and the author of Government Gangsters. Kash, good to have you back with us.
Hey, great to be on the show.
So this gag order, as I understand it, he's not allowed to talk about Michael Cohen. He can't talk about Stormy Daniels. He can't talk about David Pecker. And he can't talk about Matthew Colangelo, the guy who came right from the Justice Department and is now prosecuting Trump, right?
Well, right, of course. It's the new system of 2 tiers of justice. Look, as a former federal public defender and a former national security prosecutor who tried over 60 jury trials to verdict, not one time did the judge ever preclude the defendant from talking about the proposed witnesses in the case or his defense or literally anything else as long as it didn't lead to any sort of violence or another crime. And for the first time in U.S. history, they are bootstrapping Donald Trump because he is Donald Trump. They can't talk about Michael Cohen, the star witness, convicted felon, swindler, hustler, liar, and the guy who just last month lied to a federal judge to try to get his federal sentence terminated. And, of course, Donald Trump can't talk about Stormy Daniels, and he can't talk about anything else. But this is how they rig the system of justice, and Donald Trump is exposing it. My only question is, where's the ACLU? Where are all the constitutionalists that said everybody's right to due process is wholesome and complete, except it's Donald Trump?
In fact, my impression was always that in a court process, the defendant has the most robust speech protections because they're the one who stand accused, and they can speak out as much as they like. Usually it's their lawyer who's telling them, hey, don't say too much in public. You may make some sort of impact on the case here. But Trump's a different client, and Trump's been insisting his innocence here. And even if he does imperil himself in a legal process, he's entitled to do that, isn't he?
That's just it. The due process of the United States Constitution says that a defendant has the right to choose his defense and how he presents it. He's able to take advice from counsel, but it's ultimately up to him. And Donald Trump is being denied that right. On top of that bastardization of due process, the number 3 Colangelo at the Department of Justice left that office to give the opening statement in a state court trial against Donald Trump. And do you know what he led with? Donald Trump is a man who's guilty of conspiring to commit election fraud. That's not even a charged crime in the indictment. He is alleging that Donald Trump participated in an illegal conspiracy to a jury, which is unconstitutional. If they're not charged with that crime, you cannot talk to the jury about any such conduct. But they can, and they're doing it because they know they're in front of a rigged judge who will let everything in to kneecap Donald Trump.
But isn't there some risk that comes with the prosecutor overstating what they think they have in the case? So if he comes up there and he says, it's a big conspiracy to steal an election, and they can't prove anything like that to the jury, isn't that overstatement a way for, basically in the end, could be a win for Trump? Is that possible?
In the normal course of justice, yes. In New York City, where everybody wants to take Donald Trump out as bad as Engoron and Merchant and the rest of the mainstream media want to, the chances are very slim. But yes, a prosecutor who overstates his case and is caught short of it usually ends up losing that trial. And that's why we have prosecutorial guidelines, and that's why there's rules of evidence, and the due process clause which states if you don't charge a defendant with criminal conduct, you can't talk about that alleged criminal conduct because it is unconstitutional. But these guys don't care. They're going to overstep because they know the judge is going to let them do it and fill the holes for them.
Yeah, it's amazing. The other piece is just what they've banded this whole thing together in a way that still doesn't even make any sense to any legal analyst, and also to normal people like me who without legal training. One of the things that Alvin Bragg and company are accusing Trump of is violating a state law in order to violate a federal law, but they won't tell you what federal law he actually violated. How is that even feasible in a court? How can you stand accused of breaking a law that they don't tell you what law you broke?
You can't, but it can only happen when you rig the system of justice. And here, I hearken back to the days of, were Hillary Clinton's lawyers prosecuted for using campaign finance dollars illegally to come up with the Steele dossier? Was anyone in the Clinton campaign prosecuted for unlawfully using funds to put forth a conspiracy against Donald Trump? And now they want to prosecute Donald Trump, whose secretary put in a ledger while he was president that an X amount of dollars went to a lawyer for a legal payment, and they're going to try to bootstrap that to a felonious conduct activity that may or may not have happened in their imagination.
Yes.
Of course, it didn't happen in reality. That's the extent of it.
So let me dwell on this comparison for a moment because I think it's really worthwhile. A bunch of people have brought this up, and it's so smart that Hillary Clinton classified the fake Steele dossier allegations as legal fees for her campaign. And she said, these were legal fees that I paid. And I was like, wait a second. You came up with a fake dossier to attack your political opponent and then sent it around to the media to do that. And then, of course, it became the basis of a multi-year effort to take Trump down. And, Kash, you were right in the center of all of that. You've experienced that, seen how it went. Here's the only difference. The reason that's an apple to oranges comparison, this is Trump's own money that was used in this case. Hillary Clinton actually used campaign money when she made that claim and said that these were legal expenses.
You're right. It's a step even further removed. Donald Trump is allowed to use his money for all lawful purposes, like hiring a lawyer and paying that lawyer legal expenses. Hillary Clinton masqueraded contributions from American citizens for campaign purposes to hijack the system of justice and produce a Steele dossier document that she said was for legal services, except she made the FBI use it to illegally spy on her opponent. And she wasn't even prosecuted in state or federal court. So the two-tier system of justice, of course, rolls on. I'm glad people are picking up on this analogy and this differentiation, because it just exposes even more the venom with which and the vitriol with which they are coming after Donald Trump.
So is it your understanding that Trump, as you pointed out earlier, like in New York especially, and given what we guessed to be the composition of this jury to be heavily Democratic, that in the end, Trump is very likely, regardless of how good of a case his own attorneys mount, to be held guilty here and convicted, and then he will prevail potentially on appeal? Is that how you see this going?
Well, look, as a public defender, we used to have a saying, you only need one. And even in New York, and even in a rigged system of justice, if you get one juror who is competent and willing to follow the law and the actual Constitution, they will find Donald Trump not guilty. And that one juror is the best chance that the defense has in finding him for what we call a hung jury. Because convincing all 12 jurors in New York is going to be very hard. I'm not saying it's impossible. If they follow the facts in the law, they would exonerate Donald Trump overnight.
Right.
But the reality of where we are and the venue of where we are, I think Donald Trump's best strategy perhaps might be to find and focus on that one juror and make sure you hammer it home to him every single day so he holds his ground in the jury room when they're deliberating.
So somebody on that defense team needs to be staring at the jury box and figure out who's nodding along as we make our arguments.
Yeah, look, there's a brilliant set of defense lawyers there. They're going through their background. They're going through their social media posts. They're going through their jobs, their affiliations. They're going to know who's in that jury box. He's got a great defense team there, and they're going to put on a great defense. And I think they're going to be able to, with Donald Trump's, of course, assistance, because who knows people better than Donald Trump to say, that's our guy or that's our gal.
So if
that's who you focus on. It's a trial tactic.
And if you do get a hung jury, meaning that the jury doesn't agree unanimously to pursue a conviction for Trump, then basically that gives prosecutors two options, right? Either drop the case or try and retry it?
Right, exactly. And good luck retrying it in the middle of an election season with three other cases that the judges are going to say, my case takes precedence. Let them have that legal food fight in front of the American public, because it will just show how ridiculous of a sham these prosecutions all collectively are.
Kash Patel, talk to me about Joe Biden's administration and their involvement in all of these cases around the country. I just played a CNN clip a moment ago where they're claiming, oh, Trump has no evidence for that. It's based on literally nothing. How do you view it? How do you view the bigger hand of the Democrat Party in all of these prosecutions?
Well, let's go to the videotape, or the documents, as it were. NARA and Judge Cannon, actually, in Florida, just released a set of FBI documents which show that NARA, the National Archives librarian, directly communicating with Joe Biden's White House counsel and the Department of Justice to preclude the release of documents that Donald Trump's attorneys have been seeking in part of his defense. So they are obviously directly involved. How about another example? Joe Biden himself, as President of the United States, vitiated Donald Trump's executive privilege so that the Department of Justice could go forward and prosecute Donald Trump. How can anyone say that Joe Biden, his White House counsel, and his DOJ are not directly tied to these matters? And on top of it all, they've tried to cover it all up by preventing the release of these documents. I urge people to go check out Julie Kay's reporting today on what Judge Cannon just released. That's
critical. And yeah, that's such a good point. So Biden eradicates Trump's executive privilege claims as the current president of the United States. So he has to get involved in that sense. The other piece is that you have all of these various prosecutors either meeting with or coming from the Biden administration. So down in Fulton County, Georgia, you have Nathan Wade and all these people who are associated with the Fani Willis case meeting with, coordinating with the Biden team as they go about going after Trump. I mean, it seems crystal clear to me that there's quite obviously connecting tissue between all of these prosecutions.
Well, look, that's a great point. The team down in Georgia, Fani Willis and her lover, Lovebirds 2.0, went to the White House the week before Georgia authorized an indictment in that case, and they sat down with the vice president and the White House counsel for 6 hours at the White House. We know this because Nathan Wade was paid for 24 hours worth of work in that one-day period. So what do you think they talked about? The weather? Of course it's being talked about at the highest levels and orchestrated through White House counsel, lawyers, and legal, and that's why they're taking these meetings. And I hope the White House logs get exposed even more to show how New York has been involved at the White House and how D.C. and Florida have been involved at the White House, because it's all coming from Joe Biden, as Donald Trump said.
Kash Patel, lastly, it seems that the media is beginning to regret cheerleading these trials. At least some of them are, because they realize that the people are supporting Trump in the face of all of this. Andrea Mitchell this weekend was complaining that all of the attention on Trump at these trials is merely clouding out all of Biden's successes. The media would have all of this time to talk about how successful the Biden administration's been. And the effect of it has been that Trump's support has only grown. Do you anticipate this continuing to backfire for the left?
Yeah, because Donald Trump is exposing the two-tier system of justice. He's showing them that they're coming after everyday Americans. He's just the target in the way right now, and he is not going to bend the knee. On top of that, let's talk about Joe Biden. What exactly are they going to discuss in terms of accomplishments? The disaster that is the border, the murdering of innocent Americans by illegal immigrants, the pouring in of Chinese fentanyl, which is killing our youth, 2 world wars launched on Joe Biden's watch, 13 American soldiers dead in Afghanistan because Joe Biden's politicized withdrawal, and the rise of Russia, China, and Iran and state sponsor of terror and American hostages in captivity. What exactly are they going to go out there on the campaign trail and say is better now? $5 for peanut butter and $10 for eggs? $15 for two gallons of gasoline? It's ridiculous. They have nothing to run on, and they know it. They should be thanking Donald Trump that he is the center of attention.
Yeah. I suspect Andrea Mitchell will not be inviting Kash Patel on as a guest anytime soon. Kash, thank you very much. You know, I just remembered another catch and kill moment. You remember ABC News destroyed the Jeffrey Epstein story because they wanted to curry favor with the, quote, crown. They had the whole Epstein story. Amy Robach was on the air. She was not on the air. She was on a commercial break or something. She's talking on set at ABC, complaining that I had the whole thing. I had the whole thing years ago, she says. And they refused to run it because ABC was trying to curry favor with the crown. They wanted, what did they want? An interview with William and Kate, I think was the goal at the time. And they didn't want to get into any of these Prince Andrew allegations. They didn't want those out in public. So ABC caught and killed that story for the crown. Now, here, the centerpiece, one of the pieces today of the case against Trump is that, at least that Alvin Bragg and Matthew Colangelo and company are bringing up, is, oh, the National Enquirer was catching stories and killing them for Trump. The very influential National Enquirer was doing that. Can you imagine how many women might not have been abused if ABC had run the story years ago? Years ago? And for that matter, speaking of women being abused, you get additionally the story today that the United States Department of Justice is now paying a $138.7 million settlement with your money, more than 100 people who accused the FBI of grossly mishandling the sexual assault allegations against the Olympic doctor Larry Nassar in 2015 and 2016. The FBI grossly mishandled their claims during the Obama administration. And so now years later, you have to pay the bill, and all those women were abused. And it just kept going because the FBI looked the other way. And what are they up to these days? Oh, going after grandmas, waving American flags at the United States Capitol building. Are you disgusted enough yet? Don't worry. I've got more for you. Coming up, Congressman Chip Roy has been in literally one of the most disgusting places on earth, the United States Congress. He'll tell us all about it ahead on The Vince Coglianese Show.